You could binge watch the entire first season of Afterlife instead of watching this show. That's a show about a man who wants to himself because his wife cancer, and it's still more fun than this, okay? Spoiler alert, season 2 is on the way, so in the end, he obviously didn't himself. Just like Shut up! I know he's your friend, but I don't care. You had to make your own way here in your own plane, didn't you? Right.
What made you think, you know what, I'm just going to hammer him? I don't care what the...
Well, I thought, when they said, do you want to host the Golden Globes, all that stuff I said in the show was true. I said, I'm going to write my own jokes, right? And I thought, who do I pander to? The 200 richest people in the room or the 200 million people watching at home who aren't winning awards, who aren't millionaires? And it was a no-brainer. I was doing it for them, you know, and I didn't want to, it wasn't set out to hurt their feelings, but it was, if you're going to make it a spectator sport, then you better have something, there better be something in it for the people at home.
Okay?
You could binge watch the entire first season of Afterlife instead of watching this show. That's a show about a man who wants to end it all because his wife died of cancer, and it's still more fun than this. That was Ricky Gervais standing on the Golden Globe stage, looking directly at a room full of A-listers, and essentially telling them they're boring. And honestly, that might have been the nicest thing he said all night, because what came after that opening line was something Hollywood has never fully recovered from. But here's why this matters right now, and why you need to stop scrolling for a second. Over the past few months, something genuinely strange has been happening across Hollywood. Big names, people who used to be absolutely everywhere, have been going quiet. Not the normal kind of quiet where someone takes a break between projects. This is different. Ellen DeGeneres reportedly packed up her entire life and relocated to the UK. Not a vacation, not a temporary move, a full relocation across the Atlantic. Sean Carter lost something like 10 million followers practically overnight, which, if you know anything about how social media works, doesn't just happen by accident. Tom Hanks, a guy who for decades was considered America's most likable human being, has barely said a word publicly in months. And then there's Oprah. Oprah, who for the better part of 30 years dominated daytime television and felt like she was present in every single household in America, has noticeably pulled back from the spotlight. No big interviews, no major appearances, no surprise book club picks going viral. Just quiet. And if it were just one of these people, fine, that's nothing. People take breaks. But when you start listing them out, when you start seeing this many high-profile names all pulling back at roughly the same window of time, it starts to feel like something else entirely. It starts to feel coordinated, like people who know something is coming and are trying to get out of the frame before the picture gets taken. Now maybe that's all coincidence. Maybe everyone just decided to take a long vacation at the exact same time. Or maybe, just maybe, Ricky Gervais saw something coming years ago and tried to tell all of us about it while making us laugh. And if that's the case, then what he did on that stage wasn't just comedy. It was a warning. So let's talk about what he actually said and why millions of people are going back and rewatching these clips right now. When Ricky hosted the Golden Globes, he didn't do the usual Hollywood host thing where you gently roast a few people in the front row and then spend the rest of the night telling everyone how talented and brave they are. No, he went full scorched earth from the very first minute. He told the audience, and I'm paraphrasing here, that they claim to care about important issues, but stay silent about the things that actually matter. He pointed out that many of the people in that room had connections to some very questionable individuals and pretended like they didn't. He brought up the notorious financier connected to some of Hollywood's biggest names, and flat out suggested the official story about what happened to him didn't add up. Just said it on live television to a room full of people who definitely did not want to hear it. The camera cut to audience reactions, and you could physically see the discomfort. People were shifting in their seats, not the fun kind of uncomfortable where you laugh nervously at a joke that pushes the line a little. The real kind. The kind where you're sitting there wondering what he's going to say next, and whether it's going to involve you personally. Some people tried to laugh it off. Others couldn't even manage that. They just sat there, frozen, waiting for it to be over. And here's the part nobody talks about. In interviews after the show, Ricky admitted something pretty revealing about what happened backstage. He said actors would come up to him before the ceremony, visibly nervous, personally asking what he planned to say about them. Think about that for a second. These are people who have publicists, managers, lawyers, entire teams of professionals dedicated to controlling their public image. And they were walking up to a comedian backstage at an awards show, genuinely worried about what jokes he might tell, not sending their people, coming themselves. That's not normal behavior for someone who has nothing to hide. Ricky said that reaction alone told him a lot about the room he was walking into. His take on it was simple. He said he only ever joked about things people had done publicly. Stuff that was already in the news, already reported on, already out there for anyone to see. Nothing hidden, nothing secret, nothing that required insider knowledge. So the question becomes, if everything he said was based on public information, why were these people so terrified of hearing it out loud? Now, when people asked him after the fact why he went so hard, why he didn't hold back even a little, his answer was actually pretty straightforward. He said when the Golden Globes called and asked him to host, he sat down and thought about it and realized he had a choice to make. He could pander to the 200 richest, most powerful people sitting in that room, stroke their egos, tell them how amazing they are, and collect his paycheck. Or he could entertain the 200 million regular people watching from their couches at home. People who aren't winning awards, people who aren't millionaires, people who just tuned in hoping to be entertained on a Sunday night. And to him, that was a no-brainer. He wasn't there for the room. He was there for everyone else. He put it really clearly. He said, look, if you're going to make this a spectator sport, if you're going to broadcast it to hundreds of millions of people around the world, then there better be something in it for the people who are actually watching. You can't just have rich people congratulating each other for 3 hours and expect normal viewers to care. There has to be some entertainment value. And for Ricky, that entertainment value came from saying the things nobody else in that room would dare say out loud. He was clear that he wasn't setting out to personally hurt anyone's feelings. That wasn't the mission. But he also wasn't going to pretend that these people were somehow above being the punchline just because they're famous and wealthy. And that attitude, that complete refusal to play the game, is exactly what made those monologues hit different. And that brings us to the diversity joke, which honestly might be the most Ricky Gervais thing he's ever done on that stage. He told the audience they were planning to do an in memoriam segment that year. You know, the part of the show where they honor everyone who passed away. But he said when he looked at the list of people who had died, it wasn't diverse enough. He said it was mostly white people. And he paused and said, not on my watch. The room genuinely did not know what to do with that. Some people laughed because it was objectively funny. Other people looked absolutely horrified because they couldn't figure out if they were allowed to laugh. And that tension, that split second of confusion in the audience, was exactly the reaction Ricky was going for. Because Ricky has always been vocal about one specific thing, and he comes back to it in almost every interview he does. He believes, fundamentally, that you cannot choose your sense of humor. It's involuntary. You don't decide what's funny to you any more than you decide what food you like or what music hits you in a certain way. And he thinks the entire culture we've built around telling people they're bad for laughing at something is completely insane. He's talked about this extensively, how in normal everyday life, regular people at regular jobs get in trouble for laughing at the wrong joke or making the wrong comment or even just thinking the wrong thought. And they internalize that shame. They start genuinely wondering if there's something wrong with them as a person because they found something funny. And Ricky's response to that has always been the same. No, you're not a bad person. That's literally what humor exists for. It's the one space where we're supposed to be able to laugh at difficult things, uncomfortable things, even dark things. Take that away, and you've taken away something essential about being human. But here's where it gets really interesting. And stay with me because this connects to something bigger. Look at the timing of everything that's happened since those monologues aired. The e-files started surfacing with names attached. Court documents became public. Investigations expanded. And suddenly, the same celebrities who sat in that audience looking nervous while Ricky made his jokes are now one by one stepping away from public life. People online, and we're talking millions of people across every platform, have started going back through Ricky's old Golden Globes material frame by frame and connecting dots that didn't seem related at the time. They're looking at who he made jokes about. They're looking at how those people reacted. They're looking at what's happened to those same people since. And the pattern, at least to a lot of viewers, is hard to ignore. Was he actually warning them? Did he know something the rest of us didn't? Was the comedy just a cover for something more deliberate? Now, to be completely fair, Ricky himself has never once claimed to have inside information about Hollywood's darkest secrets. He's always maintained that his material came from what was publicly available. News articles, reported stories, things that were already documented if you cared to look. But honestly, that might be the more damning part. If everything he joked about on that stage was already out there in the open, already known, already reported by legitimate outlets, then what does that tell you about an entire industry that let it all slide for decades? He didn't need secret sources. He didn't need a whistleblower feeding him information in a parking garage. He just needed to stand on the stage and say out loud what everyone in that room already knew. But nobody had the nerve to acknowledge publicly. And the response he got from the audience that night tells you everything you need to know. They weren't laughing because it was fiction. They were squirming because it was real. There's also something worth mentioning about how Ricky approached the whole thing from a career perspective, because this part doesn't get enough attention. Most hosts in his position would have played it extremely safe. That's just how Hollywood works. You do a few gentle jokes, you keep things light, you make sure everyone has a good time. And most importantly, you make sure nobody in power leaves the building angry at you. Because those are the people who greenlight movies. Those are the people who decide who gets cast in what. Those are the people who can quietly make sure your phone stops ringing. Every comedian who has ever hosted one of these shows understands that unwritten rule. You can push the envelope a little, but you don't actually challenge anyone. You don't make anyone genuinely uncomfortable. You definitely don't look the most powerful people in the entertainment industry in the eye and tell them you know what they've been up to. Ricky didn't care about any of that, not even a little bit. He's talked openly in multiple interviews about how he specifically wrote his own material for the show from scratch and flat out refused to let anyone at the network or the Hollywood Foreign Press edit it or tone it down or remove specific jokes. He walked out on that stage with exactly the script he wanted to deliver, and he delivered every single word of it without flinching. That takes a very specific kind of confidence, the kind you really only see from someone who either has absolutely nothing to lose or genuinely believes what they're saying is important enough to accept whatever consequences come with it. And with Ricky, it honestly might have been both. And looking at everything that's unfolded since those nights, looking at the names that have surfaced in legal documents, the investigations that have expanded far beyond what anyone initially expected, the public figures who have quietly and systematically disappeared from view, it's getting harder and harder to watch those old clips and see them as just comedy. The jokes still land. They're still funny, but there's a weight to them now that wasn't there before. Or maybe it was always there and we just weren't paying close enough attention. The timing of all of this, probably not a coincidence. So here's what I want to know from you. And I'm genuinely curious about this one. Do you think Ricky saw what was coming? Do you think he knew, even in a general sense, that the walls were going to close in on some of these people eventually? Or was he just a comedian doing his job, saying funny things for a paycheck, and the rest of us are reading way too much into it after the fact? Because there's a real argument for both sides here. On one hand, the specificity of what he said and who he targeted is hard to write off as random. On the other hand, Ricky has always gone after powerful people. That's his whole thing. It's possible he just happened to aim at the right targets without knowing exactly why they were the right targets. Either way, what he did on that stage was something we hadn't seen before, and honestly haven't seen since. Nobody has stood up in front of Hollywood's most powerful people and spoken to them like that. Not before Ricky, and certainly not after. And the fact that so much of what he joked about has aged in the way that it has, that's either the greatest coincidence in comedy history or it's something else entirely. Drop your theory in the comments, because I have been going back and forth on this one for weeks now, and I genuinely cannot land on one answer. And if you're not subscribed yet, now is absolutely the time to hit that button, because the way things are moving in Hollywood right now, there is going to be a whole lot more to unpack very, very soon.